Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're plunging pretty much headfirst into one of the 20th century's most pivotal and, frankly, chilling periods. We're talking about the improbable ascent of Adolf Hitler and the deliberate, calculated steps that plunged Germany and then, all of Europe into the abyss of World War II.
In our deep dive today, it really draws its insights from a comprehensive historical account. It gives us a truly granular look at the man himself, his chillingly effective methods, and the complex environment that didn't just allow his rise, but actually propelled him to power. So our mission here is really to unravel those key moments, the critical decisions, and the, well, insidious influences that shaped this monumental period.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. Imagine Berlin, Saturday, January 28th, 1933. The capital was just this pressure cooker, simmering with rumors, putsches, strikes, military coups, you name it. The current chancellor was out, and Adolf Hitler, leader of the largest party, was aggressively demanding the chancellorship of the very democratic republic he had sworn to destroy. There was even talk of a general strike, maybe 100,000 workers ready to demonstrate against him. The tension was just palpable, like a countdown.
Yeah, and what's truly astonishing when you really look back is just how unlikely a figure Hitler was. I mean, to step into the shoes of someone like Bismarck or Hindenburg, it seemed improbable. Our sources paint him as this singular Austrian figure, not from any aristocratic or even, prominent family. Peasant stock, really, born in a modest inn in Braunau am Inn. And what's fascinating here is how his birthplace, this town right on the Austro-German frontier, it just imprinted itself on him so profoundly right from the start. Well, he became obsessed with this idea that there should be no border between German-speaking peoples. His very first lines in Mein Kampf, they echo this. It underscores his early conviction that Austria and Germany, they just belong together in the same Reich.
And his early personality, well, it certainly didn't scream future world leader, did it? His high school report from Linz describes him as, okay, certainly gifted, although only for particular subjects, fine. But then it hits you. Argumentative, autocratic, self-opinionated, and bad-tempered, and unable to submit to school discipline. I mean, that sounds like a pretty challenging teenager. How did those traits translate into the, well, terrifyingly ruthless leadership we saw later?
Right. It's clear they weren't just formative. They became almost terrifyingly effective tools for him. While he certainly wasn't, industrious in school, those very qualities, that unshakable self-opinion, his confrontational nature, they became perverse strengths, especially in a political landscape that was desperate for a strong man. His autocratic tendencies, they allowed for ruthless, singular decision-making. And that notorious bad temper, shockingly, it intimidated rivals and energized followers who craved decisive action, however brutal.
Wow. It's a chilling example of how personality traits, sort of negative in one context, can be weaponized in another.
Exactly. And he was also profoundly shaped by his history teacher at Linz, a Dr. Leopold Poetsch. Poetsch was this fanatical German nationalist. His own experiences with racial struggle on the southern German language border profoundly influenced his teaching. Years later, even as chancellor, Hitler visited Poetsch in retirement right after annexing Austria. He apparently confided to his party, "You cannot imagine how much I owe to that old man." It just tells you how deeply rooted his ideology really was, even from early on.
Okay, so after school, he hits this period he famously called the saddest period of my life, 5 years in Vienna. He described it as a time of hardship and misery, constant hunger, a continual struggle. Yet what's really striking is his declaration that it was also his hardest, though most thorough school, the place where his world picture and philosophy became the granite foundation of all my acts. He even claimed he had had to learn little, and I had to alter nothing after Vienna. That's an extraordinary claim for, a formative period. What did he actually take away from it?
It is extraordinary, and it's a terrifying testament, really, to how deeply entrenched his worldview became so early. From Vienna, he didn't just suffer, he shrewdly observed. He learned political tactics. He was particularly intrigued by what he called the infamous spiritual and physical terror he believed the Social Democrats used against opponents. And crucially, he also dissected the failures of the pan-German Nationalist Party.
What failures did he see there?
Well, he noted their inadequate appreciation of the importance of the social problem, for one, and their futility in trying to oppose the churches. But for him, their biggest mistake, their gravest error, was their inability to arouse the masses. This became a critical, self-taught lesson, one he absolutely vowed never to repeat when he started his own movement.
So how did he put those hard-won lessons into practice then? He initially met an invitation to a German Workers' Party meeting in Munich with, well, skepticism. He described the venue as a very run-down place. He thought, terrible, terrible, this was club life of the worst manner. Yet in this kind of twist of fate that would define the century, he ends up joining as the 7th member of the committee. And what's truly fascinating here is how quickly this tiny, insignificant party became the most decisive resolve of his life. There was just no turning back after that.
And two early figures were absolutely pivotal in transforming this nascent, almost laughable group into a formidable force. First, Captain Ernst Röhm, described as a tough, ruthless driving man. He organized the first Nazi strong-arm squads, which quickly grew into the SA, the Stormtroopers. Röhm brought in scores of ex-servicemen, Free Corps volunteers. He gave Hitler this ready-made, brutal enforcement arm and, crucially, a degree of protection and operational freedom from the authorities.
Okay, so Rome provided the muscle. Who else?
Then there was Dietrich Eckart, often called the spiritual founder of National Socialism, a witty journalist, a dramatist. Eckart actually mirrored Hitler's own bohemian vagrant's life in some ways, and significantly, he tirelessly preached anti-Semitic nationalism. He served as a kind of intellectual mentor to the younger, less refined Hitler.
And the SA, the Stormtroopers, they quickly evolved from just being muscle into something more, right? A symbol. Initially, yeah, they were tasked with simply silencing hecklers at Nazi meetings, but they rapidly escalated to breaking up rival parties' gatherings with pretty brutal efficiency.
Yeah.
After his first stint in jail for attacking his speaker, Hitler famously boasted, "We got what we wanted. Bellerstedt did not speak." But it was in the summer of 1920 that Hitler had what our sources call a stroke of genius.
The symbols.
Exactly. The creation of an emblem, a flag, a powerfully evocative symbol, the swastika banner. He understood, unlike his nationalist predecessors, the profound psychological need for a striking banner, something to rally and fight under, something that would appeal directly to the masses.
Right. And while Hitler was meticulously crafting his movement's internal machinery and these potent symbols, there was this larger, insidious force still gripping the German psyche. The enduring bitterness and the perceived injustices of the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty, signed after World War I, it truly cast this spell of doom over the new Weimar Republic. Germans felt they were entitled to a just peace based on President Wilson's 14 points, despite, losing the war. And what's critically important here is how the army, despite making the actual decision to sign the armistice, cleverly maneuvered the Republican government into taking the full blame.
Ah, the stab in the back myth.
Precisely. This cynical act gave rise to that poisonous November criminals myth, a narrative that Hitler then just ceaselessly hammered into the consciousness of the people. And it really raises an important question for us looking back. How much did this widespread gullibility, this willingness to embrace such a deceitful narrative, actually contribute to everything that happened later?
That gullibility certainly laid the groundwork, and Hitler, ever the opportunist, was quick to exploit it. It all kind of came to a head with the infamous beer hall putsch in November 1923. Hitler bursts into the Bürgerbräukeller, fires a revolver shot toward the ceiling, dramatically declaring the national revolution. He claimed the building was occupied by 600 heavily armed men, and that the army and the police are marching on the city under the swastika banner. Our source reveals this was just pure bluff, but in the chaos, nobody knew for sure. His vow was chillingly clear, though, to know neither rest nor peace until the November criminals had been overthrown.
Yeah, the beer hall putsch itself might have been a public humiliation, a total fiasco, really. Hitler abandoned his men, he fled, despite later Nazi propaganda trying to spin it into some heroic legend. But it was precisely during his subsequent jail time at Landsberg prison that this defeated but still unbowed leader transformed his raw, unrefined grievances into Mein Kampf, which turned out to be this terrifyingly detailed blueprint for world domination.
And he didn't serve much time, did he?
No, sentenced to 5 years, but released in less than 9 months. And crucially, despite still holding Austrian citizenship, he was never deported. That period in prison proved to be a real crucible for his ideology.
And what a blueprint Mein Kampf truly was. Let's unpack that a bit. First, foreign policy. He laid out this clear, precise plan for German world mastery. It started with a reckoning with France, who he chillingly called the inexorable mortal enemy, but even that was secondary to the German drive eastward. The core idea was Lebensraum, living space, which for him meant aggressive expansion into the east, specifically targeting Austria, the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia and the western part of Poland, and then, chillingly, Russia herself. And domestically, he made it abundantly clear there would be no democratic nonsense. None. Instead, the Fuehrerprinzip, the leadership principle, an absolute dictatorship. He obsessed over German domination, arguing that the failure to keep the Germanic race Simon pure, as he put it, had robbed us of world domination.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what's truly insightful and disturbing is how Hitler, the seemingly uneducated figure, masterfully synthesized centuries of German intellectual thought. He twisted it into this virulent, actionable ideology. These ideas weren't entirely new. They had deep historical and philosophical roots. You have Johann Gottlieb Fichte's addresses to the German nation from way back in 1807, already proclaiming Germans as the purest race, capable of regeneration, led by an elite free of any moral restraints.
Wow, 1807.
Yeah. And then there was Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel in 1814, who glorified the state as supreme. Hegel asserted that war is the great purifier and that moral claims must not be brought into collision with world historical deeds. He believed a mighty state must trample down many an innocent flower. Hitler, whether he read them directly or just absorbed these ideas from the ether, drew heavily from these concepts. It gave a terrifying intellectual veneer to his brutal vision.
Okay, let's shift to the economy. There's a fascinating and, frankly, disturbing pattern here. Industrialists, initially thinking they could control Hitler, started subsidizing the Nazi Party, especially after the Nazis made those sensational gains in the 1930 elections. A guy named Walther Funk, a former financial journalist, became a key contact man, reassuring big business that Hitler would stick to private enterprise. What's crucial here is how heavy industries profited massively from rearmament, not just from huge state contracts for tanks and planes.
But also because the regime crushed labor unions.
Exactly, ensuring cheap, compliant labor. This created this powerful alignment of interests between big business and the Nazi state, despite any initial, misgivings some might have had. Wages were actually reduced despite the cost of living going up, and strikes became explicitly verboten, no more unreasonable wage demands.
And beyond the workplace, the regime extended its control into basically every corner of German life. Dr. Robert Ley came up with this thing called Kraft durch Freude, or strength through joy, an organization designed to control not just working hours, but leisure time too. See, pre-Nazi Germany had tens of thousands of independent clubs, chess, bird watching, whatever. Under the Nazis, no organized social, sport, or recreational group could function except under the strict control of Kraft durch Freude.
So total control, what did it actually do?
Well, it offered members of the labor front these dirt-cheap vacation trips, like a Madeira cruise for only $25. Ley himself was pretty candid about the philosophy. It is more important to feed the souls of men than their stomachs. It was a chillingly effective method of total societal regimentation.
And alongside this control, the dark shadow of the early concentration camps started to spread. Places like Dachau and Buchenwald emerged under Theodor Eicke. Initially, these camps held about 20,000 to 30,000 inmates at any one time. They were used primarily for debasement and torture. It's vital to note, though, that at this early stage in the 1930s, these weren't yet the extermination or slave labor camps that would come later during the war.
Right, those horrors, as the source grimly states, had to wait for the war.
Then came the absolutely brutal Night of the Long Knives, June 30th, 1934. A dramatic, ruthless elimination of Ernst Röhm and the SA leadership after tensions rose with the regular army. Hitler, who claimed he had this secret hope to avoid conflict, ultimately ordered the arrests and executions, including Röhm's. When a pistol was left for Röhm to use on himself, he famously refused, saying, "If I am to be killed, let Adolf do it himself."
Wow. That event just brutally demonstrated Hitler's absolute ruthless consolidation of power and his cynical view of the generals who he believed could be had for surprisingly little. It solidified his grip like almost nothing else had before.
And using the sweeping powers of the Enabling Act, Hitler moved incredibly fast. He abolished the separate powers of Germany's historic states within just a fortnight of gaining full power. This unified the Reich for the first time by utterly destroying its age-old federal character. Other political parties, like the Social Democrats, were just quickly eliminated or suppressed. The Social Democrats, incredibly, even voted to approve Hitler's foreign policy in May 1933, trying to appease him. Then, boom, their buildings and newspapers were seized, their party dissolved as subversive and inimical to the state. It shows the sheer speed and totality of that consolidation.
So, having cemented his domestic control, we arrive at the calculated step-by-step road to war. From 1934 to 1937, Hitler's tactic was really a masterpiece of deception. Basically, talk peace, prepare secretly for war, and proceed with enough caution to avoid any preventive military action from the West. This deception was, in essence, the very cornerstone of his foreign policy during those years.
He showed his true colors pretty early on, though, didn't he? With the brutal murder of Austrian Chancellor Dollfuss in July 1934, SS members, chillingly dressed in Austrian army uniforms, shot Dollfuss. Hitler got the news while listening to Wagner at Bayreuth. He was described as greatly excited. But then with that characteristic cynicism, he feigned innocence, saying, "I must go across for an hour and show myself, or people will think I had something to do with this."
Yeah, that brutal act, even with his fake innocence, was such a clear signal of his ruthless intent towards Austria. It foreshadowed later annexations and revealed his willingness to use assassination as a political tool long before full-scale war broke out.
And Germany's involvement in the Spanish Civil War, starting in '36, that wasn't just about supporting Franco, was it? The Condor Legion's infamous obliteration of Guernica.
No, it served Hitler's shrewd, calculated, and far-seeing policy perfectly. His purpose wasn't just helping Franco win, it was deeply strategic. He wanted to prolong the conflict, exacerbate internal strife in France, and critically, prevent Italy from aligning with the Western powers, thereby driving Mussolini inevitably towards the Rome-Berlin axis. This intervention directly served his long-term strategic goals for dominating Europe.
Okay, and this is where it gets truly chilling, right? The Hossbach Memorandum, November 5th, 1937. Hitler gathers his military and foreign policy chiefs and just lays it out, his irrevocable decision to go to war. He stated Germany's problem could only be solved by force, period. Then he laid out the timing, 1943-45 at the latest, maybe sooner, and the immediate targets, Czechoslovakia and Austria.
Yeah.
The generals who were there were stunned, but not, as the record shows, by the immorality of it all.
No, they were stunned by Germany's sheer unpreparedness for such a conflict at that moment.
Right. It was an unblinking declaration of intent, regardless of readiness.
And the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria, followed pretty swiftly in March 1938. Hitler had this aggressive meeting where he just subjected Austrian Chancellor Schuschnigg to relentless bullying. He accused Austria's entire history of being an uninterrupted act of high treason, end quote. Hitler, described by observers as being in a state of ecstasy, later publicly claimed this God-given mission to unite his homeland with the Reich, twisting facts about Schuschnigg's planned plebiscite, calling it an election forgery to justify his actions. It was pure coercion cloaked in a divine mandate.
The Czech crisis and the Munich Agreement in 1938 further illustrate this calculated deception, don't they? Hitler openly encouraged the Sudeten German party leader Henlein to essentially bamboozle the British about acting on Berlin's instructions. All the while, Hitler himself was growing restless for action, constantly seeking precise info on Czech fortifications, their own Czech Maginot Line. The Western allies, Britain and France particularly, then tragically pressured Czechoslovakia to just surrender the Sudetenland, leading to Chamberlain's infamous quarrel in a faraway country between people of whom we know nothing speech.
Yeah, it sealed Czechoslovakia's fate and really showcased the West's desperate and ultimately misguided attempt at appeasement.
So by 1939, the march to total war seems undeniable, systematic, horrifyingly efficient. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, that non-aggression pact with Russia.
Right, a scarcely disguised bait, offering to basically divide up Eastern Europe, including Poland.
Yep.
This was a cynical, purely strategic move that Britain and France could not match. It effectively cleared Hitler's path eastward. War planning was formalized at the Reich Defense Council in June '39. Göring confirmed Hitler's decision to draft 7 million men. They openly discussed greater use of concentration camp inmates and Czech slave labor in wartime to boost the labor supply. Himmler explicitly stated greater use will be made of the concentration camps in wartime. The full, brutal scope of their intentions was being laid bare, no hiding it now.
And then the invasion. September 1st, 1939. Poland. Hitler chose the moment with icy deliberation, making sure absolute military superiority. He justified it all with blatant lies about Polish attacks.
Okay.
But despite all the systematic planning, the German public itself was apparently stunned by the actual news of war.
The Western campaigns followed quickly in 1940. April, you have the brazen ultimatums to Denmark and Norway demanding protection of the Reich. Despite the early successes, Hitler reportedly had these nervous crises during the Norwegian campaign. Jodel's diary notes terrible excitement and worse fears from any bad news coming back. It suggests this surprising underlying anxiety even amidst his aggression.
Then came the stunning fall of France, May-June 1940. Characterized by that unprecedented tank avalanche through the Ardennes, using blitzkrieg tactics perfected in Poland and Norway. Yet, even with this overwhelming success, Hitler showed unaccountable worry about the southern flank. He apparently raged that the generals were ruining the whole operation. And Göring significantly influenced the decision to let the Luftwaffe handle the Dunkirk encirclement, freeing up the panzer divisions for the southern thrust.
And King Leopold III of Belgium's capitulation on May 28, 1940, that proved to be a highly controversial moment. He surrendered against his own government's unanimous advice. He'd come to the conclusion that the cause of the Allies is lost, end quote. This decision led to angry denunciations from both French Premier Reynaud and the Belgian Premier Pirlo, who publicly stated the king had broken ties with his own people.
Hitler then exacted his ultimate revenge, didn't he? The Second Armistice at Compiègne, June 22, 1940, a deliberate, really theatrical staging of the signing in Marshal Foch's old railway car,
Yeah.
the very spot where Germany had surrendered in 1918. His shrewd move, though, was leaving that unoccupied zone in the south and southeast of France, Vichy France, a masterstroke, really. It divided France geographically and administratively, making it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for a cohesive French government in exile to form.
Yeah. And meanwhile, this massive propaganda machine was just churning both at home and abroad. In Germany, this deadly conformity descended upon the press. Newspaper circulation actually declined, but the party's financial gain increased exponentially under Maximan. He wielded this terrifying power to suppress any publication and acquire it for basically a pittance. On the foreign front, the German embassy in the U.S., led by Hans Thomsen, was actively supporting isolationists to keep America out of the war.
How are they doing that?
Well, our sources mention offers of money to congressmen and to American authors to write pro-isolationist books. Charles Lindbergh, this revered American figure, even accepted a high German decoration, the Service Cross of the German Eagle with star. And chillingly, he publicly stated his belief that England would soon collapse.
And Hitler himself made these public peace offers after Poland's defeat, which notably included the Molotov-Ribbentrop Declaration, cynically blaming Britain and France for continuing the war. But Hitler knew his vague proposals would be rejected, especially by Churchill. He basically confirmed, as our source notes, that this statement will have been my last, then we shall fight. It was pure performance designed to shift blame, not genuinely seek peace.
And what's truly horrifying, something we have to mention, is the incredible depth of Nazi barbarism unleashed immediately in Poland, which Hitler himself warned his generals would be not to the taste of German generals. Hans Frank, the governor-general, immediately declared Poles slaves of the German Reich. He implemented the Extraordinary Pacification Action, or AB Action, a systematic program to liquidate the Polish intelligentsia leaders, academics, clergy. Frank chillingly boasted of some thousands of Polish intellectuals being killed, adding that these were the Fuehrer's orders. It was a deliberate ideological war of extermination right from the very beginning.
It's just horrific. And one incredibly close call for Germany, a real what-if, was the Mechelin incident in January 1940. German plans for the entire Western offensive literally fell into Belgian hands when a plane crashed. This caused absolute consternation in Berlin. Jodl noted in his diary that if the enemy was in possession of all the files, the situation would be catastrophic. This stunning breach led to an immediate halt to all troop movements, forcing a significant revision of the invasion plans, a rare moment of genuine vulnerability and fear among the German high command.
So, after walking through all this entire harrowing journey, what does it really mean for you listening today? If we connect this to the bigger picture, Hitler's rise wasn't simply about one man, however charismatic or monstrous. It was this terrifying confluence of a deeply embedded, insidious ideology combined with political shrewdness that, you have to admit, bordered on genius in its ruthlessness, and the relentless exploitation of profound national grievances, real or perceived. This potent mix led a nation and then a continent down an absolutely catastrophic path.
Which really raises an important question for us today, doesn't it? In a world that's just saturated with information, maybe overloaded with information, how can we possibly discern the true, often hidden blueprints of ambition, whether political or otherwise? And maybe more importantly, what role do collective actions, or perhaps more critically, collective inactions, play in shaping the course of history, especially when we're faced with narratives deliberately designed to exploit, divide, and mislead?